commissioner and run for presidency, among other senior positions in public office, is to be 40 years old and above. Since the Constitution defines a young person as being between the ages of 15 to 35, it therefore means that due to these unnecessary age caps, prescribing that one must be aged 40 and above, young people are both systemically and legally excluded from participating in key positions in government. In addition, youth are constitutionally allowed to vote at 18 years of age, but can only run for public office at age 21. This too is a paradoxical systemic quirk that affirms that at age 18, young people have developed enough political consciousness and maturity to be aware of their political preferences, so they can vote for other people who are older than them, but they cannot be trusted to be leaders in public office. Willie Trust notes that young women have experienced more obstacles than young men when they aspire to occupy leadership roles that they want to partake in political and decision-making processes. Violence against young women in politics, both physical and digital, has dissuaded a gendered approach to youth participation. In leadership, political, electoral, and governance spaces, violence against young women can be named in its diverse forms, which include revenge porn, sexual harassment and exploitation, the instrumentalization of narrative peddling, assaults, abductions, torture, rape, imprisonment, leadership shaming, body shaming, among other forms of violence. The participation of youth is also affected by drug and substance abuse, with youth as young people being the most affected, and this has impacted how youth show up and organize. As it stands, the current youth participation as we head to the 2023 general elections, which is less than 3 months away, is a mixed bag. The Citizens of Coalition Change process, nomination process, and the ZANU-PF primary elections exposed the keen interest of youth in running as candidates in the upcoming elections. This is contrary to the narrative that youth are apathetic and not interested in standing up to be elected into public office. Willie Trust argues that the rhetoric that youth are apathetic and do not want to participate is a form of ageistic political narrative peddling that youth have challenged and will continue to challenge. Youth are interested and keen to participate. However, the participation terrain is systemically and structurally designed to violently keep youth out, and this must change. In spite of the legislative infrastructure that is available to support youth participation, key electoral stakeholders have failed to promote youth participation in the upcoming elections. The National Youth Policy, particularly Thematic Area 3, mandates the government to ensure the participation in political processes of young people. In addition, the state and its organs, through Section 20 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe and the African Youth Charter, for which Zimbabwe is a signatory, are mandated to use affirmative action measures to ensure the participation and representation of youth in all aspects of life, including political processes. Article 11 of the African Youth Charter, subsection A, states, "They shall guarantee the participation of youth in parliament and other decision-making bodies as prescribed in other laws." Subsection C of the same article states, "They shall ensure equal access of young men and women to participate in decision-making and fulfilling civic duties." The Zimbabwe Electoral Commission has pegged the nomination fees at $1,000 for National Assembly candidates. Conscious of these instruments and the constitutional provisions, the exorbitant nomination fees contravene the spirit of youth representation and participation in public life, as the systemic and structural organization of youth processes is much more favorable to individuals who are economically elite in a country where the majority of youth are either unemployed or in the informal sector. Currently, there are a number of challenges that will prevent young people from participating in the 2023 elections, with poverty playing a central role. According to statistics, 70% of young people in Zimbabwe are unemployed, and those that work experience extreme poverty. The economic environment exposes youth to exploitation and control for political gain. Underprivileged youth have been reduced to selling their rights to participation for food, money, and promises that never materialize. In a democratic dispensation such as Zimbabwe, politicking is often practiced by those with the political muscle, with youth reduced to pawns in a political game and also being sidelined in major political issues and relegating the vote to a commodity ready to be picked by those with cash. Young people are used to instigate violence against political rivals in exchange for money, drugs, alcohol, and food. Such bread and butter issues negatively impact meaningful youth participation and even democracy. Insufficient information on processes like elections is another reason why youth participation has remained low. Young people lack constitutional information as well as information on the electoral process. In Zimbabwe, in really trust constitutional programs here in Zimbabwe, the realization was that more than 70% of youth had no idea of the Constitution and its provisions. Knowledge of constitutional provisions on the rights and responsibility to participate in democracy and governance processes is essential in enabling youth participation in elections. Lack of transparency in previous elections has contributed to youth losing interest in Zimbabwe's electoral system, which is also contributing to youth voter apathy. Historically, elections in Zimbabwe have been hampered with lack of transparency in the conduct of electoral processes, in particular voter registration, voting, and results management processes, which has contributed to lack of faith and motivation to participate. A substantial portion of youth have worked since 2019 believe that the electoral processes lack transparency. Even though young people who organized to participate in the 2023 election, there is genuine concern over the transparency of the electoral process. Such issues that youth highlight with regards to the lack of transparency in the electoral process include how the date of the election has taken very long to be proclaimed, which disadvantages other electoral candidates, and also how the public still has no access to the voters' roll less than 3 months before the election. In May 2021, a 10-seat quota system was introduced in the Constitutional Amendment Bill, which became an act. The 10-seat quota system is a cosmetic fix to a deeper and broader youth exclusion question that has become epidemic in all aspects of the Zimbabwean social, economic, and political organizing of citizens. The youth quota in itself is not a reflection of the youth interest and was in no way initiated, designed, sponsored, and approved by young people. Though young people are willing to take advantage of the 10-seat quota system, a broader and bigger conversation around genuine youth inclusion and youth-friendly reforms in leadership and governance processes must begin to happen. Willie Trust has, since the passing of the Constitutional Amendment No. 2 Act, criticized the youth quota as being exclusionary and that it has no gender mechanism, no disability inclusion mechanism, and also as exclusionary to persons who are independent candidates and do not belong to any political party. The youth quota must be taken as a temporary fix, and young people, as well as the body of all progressive Zimbabweans, must advocate for the disruption of ageist normative frameworks and favor genuine youth representation. In light of the 2023 election, Willie Trust also analyzed the women's quota as a vehicle for young women's participation in public office and noted with concern that in the first 10 years in its function, there was no young women who accessed public office leadership through the women's quota. Furthermore, upon the extension of the women's quota through the Constitutional Amendment No. 2 Act, Willie Trust notes with concern the eagerness of some older women in politics to ensure that young women are given 10 seats of the available 60 seats of the women's quota. This is a clear indication of ageism, which seeks to undermine the representation of young women on the basis of discrimination by age. Willie Trust notes that, given the little time we have before the 2023 election, and also given all these issues in terms of the representation and participation that we find ourselves in relating to youth in Zimbabwe, there is so much that can be done to ensure that youth participate fully in the electoral process. What can be done as a short-term intervention could include these 5 things. Youth should utilize the last chance to register to vote. Voter registration centers are still operational across the country. and we encourage youth to register before the voters' registration process is closed for 2023 elections. Young people should follow up on the Electoral Amendment Bill, organize around it, and give demands in line with youth-friendly reforms. Youth must show up to exercise their constitutional and democratic right to vote on election day, monitor, and also defend the vote. Young candidates must be given support, and special protection from violence must be offered, especially to young female candidates. Young people must support the electoral process at all levels, from national to grassroots, participating as election observers and organizers for peace before, during, and post the election. The long-term recommendations that our organization has are related to youth-friendly reforms. Specific budget caps on how much is spent during election campaigns must be put in place and must apply to all candidates to ensure that those with the bigger budget do not simply outweigh young people simply because they have more money. The age for running for public office must be reduced from 21 to 18 years. If youth can vote at 18, they should also be allowed to run for public office at 18 years. Term limits must be put in place on the number of years one can spend in public office, on the number of times one can be re-elected in public office, not only in an executive level, but also at lower levels, to ensure there is consistent leadership renewal and also young people get chances to access public office leadership. The required years of experience to access senior positions in public office must be lowered from 40 years. This includes such positions as Senate, President, judges. All positions in public office must be accessible by the time one is 18 years old, in alignment with Section 56 of the Constitution on non-discrimination on the basis of age. What is more important is their credentials and not necessarily their age. A youth-friendly electoral act must be enacted that mandates that for political parties to be eligible to contest in an election, they must submit 50% of their candidates as young people under the age of 35. Affirmative action and youth-friendly electoral reforms must be made to ensure 50-50% representation of youth in all public office. I've now reached the end of our press statement.